thank you for joining us for our 7th episode of Cowboy Coffee with Meeker Alumni, a podcast created to help reconnect Meeker High School alumni with former classmates, teachers, and friends while following current Meeker High School student-athletes, sports, and their activities. My name is Bobby Gutierrez from the mighty class of 1979. I'm joined by my fellow host, Hallie Turner Blunt, Meeker High School class of 1995, and Dale Dunbar, Meeker High School class of 1978, and our studio technician is Rich Klinsman. He is Otis High School class of 1994. Go ahead.
Go Bulldogs.
Go Bulldogs. Okay. Thank you for being here. Also, thank you to Lucas Turner, who created this studio. We are in the studio at the Herald Times building on the corner of 4th and Main Streets in downtown Meeker, Colorado. We appreciate the use of their studio. Today is Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. We record these sessions and then upload them onto Facebook. And tonight our special guest is Butch Theos. I say our friend. Butch is, because I think Butch is everybody's friend. And Butch is a 1965 graduate of Meeker High School. Welcome to the show, Butch. You're a bit older than everyone here in the room here today, but I've known you for as long as I can remember. I don't remember when it was you graduated. I was 4, or not quite 4 then, but I do remember you way back, coming back from college and working on your dad's ranch, and that your family's been in the area forever, so maybe why don't you go ahead and tell us about your family coming to the area, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, yeah. I'll start way back when my grandparents came to the United States.
Okay.
It was in, I can't tell you exactly, and a lot of these stories that I've heard have been embellished a little bit, but that's the way they are, and that's the way I'm going to tell them.
Okay.
But, yeah, my dad's dad, Angelo Theos, who I'm named after, came into this country, came into the United States in the late 1800s, about 1890 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Came over from Greece on a boat, went through Ellis Island, and ended up in Price, Utah. And the reason he probably went there is he probably had friends that were working in Price, Utah, and they told him to come, so he did. And he worked in the coal mine for several years. He finally met a couple brothers, and their last name was Papathanasheo. And if you can pronounce that, Bobby, I'll give you an A.
No.
But anyway, so they said, let's combine our money and we'll buy a sheep outfit.
Oh, wow.
So they did, and that was all open range back then. It was public land was open to everybody, and there wasn't a lot of private ground yet. So they, I assume they had about 1,500 head of sheep, and they were
in Utah.
In Utah, yeah.
Okay.
So they put that herd together, and they were the sheep herders, and they wintered in Utah down by a place that's a ghost town now, Watson, Utah, where my dad was born, and my uncle Nick Theos was born in Watson, Utah. So they wintered there, and then they'd trail the sheep over the top of Baxter Pass. They'd go into Loma, what's Loma now, and they'd load them on the train, and they'd summer them up around Leadville. And then in the fall, they'd put them on the train, the lambs would go to Denver, the ewes would go back to Watson, and they'd winter there again. Well, after several years, the guys did quite well. They were their own herders. They didn't have any expenses to speak of. They all decided to sell out the sheep and go back to Greece and retire. And they were only in their 40s. So they did that. They went to the Bank of Vernal, and that's where they had their money. And they cashed in everything, and the Bank of Vernal said, you're going to have to wait a few days so we can collect that money. They each had $100,000 in their name.
Oh, there you go.
And I don't know what that computes to this day, but it's quite substantial. So anyway, they gathered their money up and they went back to Greece. But I got ahead of myself a little bit. When they were herding sheep, the boys, the 2 brothers, said, go back and marry our sister. So my granddad got on the train, went back to New York, got back on a boat, went to Lamia, Greece, where my grandmother was, married her, brought her back to the United States, and that's when they had five children out of that marriage. So then they decided to sell out and go back to Greece. Well, they went back to Greece, and my dad was only 3 years old then, or 4, and they stayed about a year.
He was born here.
He was born in Watson, and the only ones that were alive or born then was my dad and my 2 uncles. He had 2 brothers that were older than him. So they went back to Greece, and my granddad just didn't like it back there anymore. There wasn't the opportunity that there was here. So he told my grandmother, he said, "Mary, we're going to go back to the United States."
Oh, my word.
She said, well, no. Well, she said, "I'll tell you what, we can go back, but I want a home in Grand Junction, Colorado." So he said, "That's a deal." So they came back, but at that point in time, they had drachmas for money, for Greek money, and they couldn't bring it back. They made him keep it there in Greece. So he came back, but he had a lot of good credit by then with the Bank of Vernal and some other banks. So he came back, and they loaned him the money, and he bought the house in Grand Junction. And that's when he came to Meeker, about 1925, 26, 27, in that area sometime. And he started buying these parcels of land. The Homestead Act had taken place. There was 160 acres here, 40 here. We counted 40-some families that lived on the ranch at one time. And he bought them out just a piece at a time, 50 cents an acre. Some of them, the most he paid in Coal Creek was $20 an acre. So he accumulated 15,000 acres, and he was just a good businessman and had good men working for him. And actually, the sheep herders were my dad and the brothers. He'd go to Grand Junction in April, and he'd tell the principal, "Mr. Principal, I got to take my kids home, and they get to help me." He said, "They're just kids. They're going to help you, lamb sheep." "Yes, they're my main men." So he'd get them out of school, and they'd came to the ranch, and they were just sheep herders. There was my Uncle Dino, Uncle Bill, Uncle Nick, my dad, and the youngest was Mike, and then they had a daughter, Helen Malaris. Well, she married a Malaris. So they came to Meeker, and they were the sheep herders. We used to trail the sheep clear to the flat tops above Trapper's Lake. And I was a kid. First time I went on the trail, I had a good horse. His name was Friday. And it just builds character. We'd get up at 3:30 in the morning, unhobble your horse and saddle him up and saddle the mules and move the sheep. And anyway, that went on for about 10 years. And then we finally bought a place up just across from the Sleepy Cat, and Bill Levy owns that property now. And that's when my dad and his brother-in-law split up, and it was a great split up. I mean, he took his part, my dad took his part. And then, let's see, in that 61, I can tell stories forever, but we got snowed in on top of the flat tops. There were about 2,000 ewes that year. We had 3 feet of snow on top of the flat tops, and Governor Love was our governor then. And he got a big transport, and they put hay in it. And they started to fly it out of Denver. Well, in the meantime, Harry Jordan had about 50 horses. He worked for the 101. He drove those horses clear to the top of the flat tops, and they broke trail for the sheep. And they brought all the sheep off through those horse tracks. So,
oh my word! Some
good stories, and but again, it builds character. I was in the 8th grade then, so.
Oh, wow.
And then as time went on, they split up. And basically all the ranches are still intact. And I guess Tony and I are still in the business together, and then I'll get into that a little bit later. But we've kept everything intact. We've improved it, I guess. We've bought more land. We've traded permits around, so it makes it more logical to how we run and so on. So I graduated in 1965, and in our class, we had one of the biggest classes to graduate out of Meeker. There were, I think, 68 of us.
Oh, wow.
And I think we were the wartime babies, they said. So we graduated, and I went to school at Mesa State. I had a football scholarship, and I made the traveling team and the training table. Then I blew my knee out. You know how that goes, Dale. So anyway, I went there, and I graduated from Mesa State in 67. Then I went on to Colorado State University and graduated from there in 1970.
With what kind of degrees?
I had a degree in animal production, and just learned a lot. I mean, we did a lot of cattle stuff and chickens and everything, so it was pretty well-rounded education that I had.
So
And at that time, Mesa State was a 2-year college, right?
You're right. Yeah.
And just to go back just a little bit, in the high school, you said you played college football. So you obviously played high school football. Who was your coach?
We had 2 coaches. When we were juniors, we went 0-9. Talk about a long season. Mr. Sullivan, and he was a great guy. But anyway, and then as we went, we got a Coach Duffy, Ed Duffy, and then we went 7-2, and then they did really well from then on. We had some. I was on the All-State team, and a couple others. We had Rusty Lancaster as our quarterback, and Gary Orton was our fullback, and Gene Starbuck was our center, and Floyd Franklin was a guard, and George Ney, and George only weighed 120 pounds, but he was a guard too.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, I can go on and on. I know I didn't forget other people, but we had a pretty good team. So, and then our wrestling team was okay back then. We had Mr. Starbuck as a coach.
Okay.
And we qualified 5 for state, and I went out there and I got beat the first round, the second round, and I was done.
But you qualified and went?
Yeah.
Okay,
we went in 1965, yeah.
Okay.
So upon graduation, then I went on to college, and I came back to the ranch, and I knew what I always wanted to do. I went back to Greece in 1970 and 71 and visited some of my cousins, nephews, and everything, or my dad's nephews, and anyway, I enjoyed it.
And is there a family business back there as well as?
I've lost track of the people. They had some money because my granddad left a lot of money over there, and we couldn't bring it back. So They did quite well. So, and then the brothers, and then I failed to mention my mother's dad too. He was in the sheep business, but he came a little later. He came in the 30s and 40s. So, and he was over in Price, Utah. He had about 1,500 head of sheep, and he sold out early. In fact, he passed away on the day I graduated in 1965.
Oh, wow.
So, but he's a great guy, just a friendly, just a gentle person.
And siblings? Did you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 2 sisters, and
they are?
Zoe Alcatat, she lives in California, and then Elena Mogensen lives in Meeker.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Older, younger?
They're both younger.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the oldest. Still am, I guess.
Still. Yes. Okay.
Well, you talked a little bit about back in the early days you trailed your sheep, or you put them on a train and move them back and forth winter to summer grounds. Do you guys still do that, or what do you do now?
We do. But our permits are different now. We've held four permits altogether around Sleepy Cat Mountain. So basically, we open the gate and we're into our summer range off of the ranch, which is what took us years to get that accomplished. And then and then we come back into the ranch. We separate the lambs off, and then we go down to the desert in the winter. I'm sure you've seen the sheep go through town.
Oh, sure.
We just trail all the way down to Rangeley's where we winter. And those 2 permits are all together also. It's taken us a long time to put that together too, but it makes it so much more manageable, and the sheep know where they're at. And just a sideline, we let's see, in about 77 or 78, when I was in college, they said you either have to raise a sheep for its wool or its lamb. You can't have both. I mean, you'll have both, but not exceptional in either one. So a friend of mine, John Jewell in Rifle, he started dabbling in the merino breed, out of Australia, New Zealand. So we started breeding to his merino rams, and today we really have a really fine wool. In fact, if you watch the Olympics and the closing ceremonies, our wool is what made those sweaters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we're in a group. There's about 4 of us from western Colorado that raise all merinos, so that wool is made from these 4 flocks. And Ralph Lauren is the one that developed the sweaters and everything. So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah. And kind of going in that because you talk of the lamb and the wool because your lamb or the meat is in Whole Foods. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story, Bobby. We were we went to the convention in, it was over on the east, by Vale. I can't remember the small town. But anyway, we went there, and there was this, I was a wool growers president then, and I wanted to make everybody welcome. There was this lady there and her husband.
This is what year?
It was 2005, I believe.
Okay.
Right there close. So I went there and I introduced myself and tried to make them feel welcome. They had 50 head of sheep. So I said, how do you process your lambs? What do you do with 50 lambs? I mean, she said, we go to Whole Foods. I said, really? She said, and I'd heard of that. It's an all natural, well, you've all heard of Whole Foods. So she said, but they're looking for more lambs. So she gave me a contact number.
She said, I got a few.
Hello. I think I can help you out today. So I called the guy, and Dave Rudlinger was his name. And he said, well, I'd like to come out and see your operation. So I said, okay. So we took him. The sheep were right at Sleepy Cat. I mean, it was beautiful.
And he's coming from where?
He's Boulder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was their main headquarters was in Boulder. So he came out, and he said, is there any place I can fish? I really love to fish. So I got a hold of a guy up there. I'll think of his name. But anyway, he went up to, I got him a place to fish just above Lake Avery and Livingston.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So he went up there and he fished. He caught some beautiful trout, beautiful, and he catch and release. So that sealed the deal. So he said, this is going to work. So we said, okay. So he wanted I think 150, 200 lambs at the most. And we sent them to him, some beautiful mountain lambs. And they want natural and no antibiotics. And we didn't change anything. We just sent him our lambs. That we never do any of that anyway. So we went there, and about a week later he called. He said, I'd like some more. He said, I can't keep enough of it on the shelf. I said, all we have is 50 left because we sold the rest of them.
And how many stores were they?
Well, at that point in time, they were just around Colorado. But later, they went to 4 or 5 different states.
Oh, wow, okay.
And now, well, anyway, we had the 50 lambs. Now we're up to over 1,600 a year we send them.
Oh, my word.
But we're in a gap, and it's an acronym for something, but their main's just as they want the animal treated right. They don't want any antibiotics in it. They don't want us to use shockers. They don't want us, and we don't do any of that anyway. Our animals are precious to us, so we take care of them. So that wasn't a hard deal to get through, and it's quite lengthy though. It's quite a process. And then we did the same with the wool. It's basically the same program, except they call it RWS, and that stands for some other acronym that I won't come to mind right now.
Whole Foods, or
no? This is different. This is the merino for the wool. Mm-hmm. So Tony mostly did all that computer stuff because that's here for me.
And so who was it that told you couldn't have it both ways?
That's Colorado State University.
Oh, okay.
You either got to raise a sheep for the wool or you raise it for a lamb. And
he proved them wrong. Okay.
Losers.
It seems like, though, and I remember you guys talking just vividly about the wool and that, and being progressive enough to say, we are going to look at both of these things, and having the wherewithal to say, Whole Foods, and to, keep a family business alive that long by being willing to say, what can we do? What can we change? And what can we maintain that keeps it tried and true to the...
Yeah, that was the selling point, was that you didn't have to change. Is kind of the way you were doing it was
and I knew there was a market out there for that. And a friend of mine said, "Did you major in economics?" I said, "No." It doesn't take rocket science to figure out. I told our son Tony, I said, "There's 3 things we have to sell: lamb, wool, and hunting, and we better do it really well to stay in the business." So I tell the story when lambs are really high now. They're like $250, $260 a pound. But when lambs were 50 cents a pound back in '77, we netted more money. In fact, I've told this story 100 times, but I bought a 1977. That's the year you were born, wasn't it? I bought a pickup.
I said you were the oldest.
My mind's good, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, I bought a pickup. It cost me $6,000, and lambs were 50 cents a pound. Well, Normally, you put 400, 100-pound lambs on a truck at 50 cents a pound. That's $20,000. 40,000 pounds.
Let me do that, man. Just
You got it.
go ahead.
So
I believe you.
Today, those 200 lambs will bring you probably $100,000. But a truck today, that truck I'm driving now is $80,000.
Yep.
You're not going to buy 3 of them like you could have.
Right.
So that's where our buying power is. Plus, you've got groceries, you've got fuel, you've got insurance, you've got herders that we have to bring from Peru and pay their plane tickets, and these camps now are $20,000 to $30,000 a piece anymore. Tires are $200 a whack. You know all this. So, but it's interesting. Then we had three kids: Willie, Katrina, and Tony, and they did well. Willie was a state champion. Tony was in the all-state football team, and he played some football at Mesa also. Mm-hmm. Then Katrina, we went to probably 1,000 horse shows. And we got a lot of halters and blankets. And she had that horse, remember, Twister?
Yeah.
He was awesome. So we've done all that, and we have 4 grandkids. And in fact, Brady, our oldest grandboy, he's back in the business. That makes 5 generations here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw you yesterday across the street in the cafe there, having lunch, and kind of a family deal, and there was Brady and yourself and Tony and all of them. So yeah,
it's good. I mean, it's really good. In fact, he married a girl from Kemmer, Wyoming, and they have twice as many sheep as we have. So we don't have to teach her much. In fact, I'm learning from her.
And so kind of back in the day, there were thousands of sheep, and now there's what is the number, and how many sheep ranches are there in the western Colorado?
Well, Colorado ranks 3rd in the nation as far as sheep numbers.
Okay, good.
We're number 1 in the nation as far as feeding lambs. They feed a lot of lambs on the east slope where the corn and soybean and all that hay is all that. But I use a scenario between Meeker and Rifle at one point in time, probably in the 60s and 70s. There were 40,000 sheep between Meeker and Rifle. Now there's maybe 10,000 at the most. Mm-hmm. And what happened is, in my analogy of the whole thing, is that the kids didn't come back to the ranch. And the parents got older, and they said, what the heck? I'm just, why keep it? And so, in fact, one guy sold out just this last fall, the same scenario. His son didn't want it. His daughters didn't want it. So the guy's 65 years old. It's time to move on. So that's what happened, a lot of it. And it's not an easy business. It really isn't. We have to, not worry, but we have, we have to buy or find shearing crews. That's not easy anymore. Most of those guys are out of New Zealand, Peru, and to bring them over on a visa, especially with the pandemic we've got going on, it's tough. And then plus you're dealing with the predators. We've got bear and lion and bobcats, now the wolves are reintroduced and are going to be. So it's another hurdle we have to go over.
So you mentioned the predators. What kind of loss do you have in a year?
Dale, if we can keep it at 5% of our docking count, we feel we've done really well. And we've got these guard dogs, these Anatolians and Akbash and so on, and they've really helped us tremendously. But you have to be really careful because we've got a lot of public going through our sheep now, and you have to have a dog that's aggressive towards coyotes but not aggressive towards people. And there's a fine line there. You have to kind of be really careful. Right. And our herders are really good that way to keep them away. And the forest tells us when they're going to have a four-wheeler race or whatever is going on. So we can adjust our herding techniques to accommodate that whatever's going on.
I went to one of the wagon wheel rendezvous for ATVs, and Tony gave a talk on how to deal with the dogs if you would happen to run onto them and just don't engage with them.
Exactly, yeah. Or don't. There's a lot of guys just go really fast, and that just turns them on worse.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to protect their herd. They're not trying to be mean or anything, but some of those people are ornery with them too. They'll drive at them or try to aggravate them, and so I guess that's a different sport. But I also declined to mention my dad in 1940, he was herding sheep, and they call this place Hell's Hole Canyon down in Utah. So he got a notice he was drafted. So my granddad rode his horse to my dad, and he said, "You got drafted." He said, "Okay." He said, "I figured it was better than herding sheep." So he went to Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training, and while he was there, his sergeant said, "Tom, do you know anything about tanks?" "Well, sure I do." He thought water tanks. Yeah. So they put him in the tank corps. But he was a good boss. He was a good, he worked with men all his life, the Spanish people and the Greeks and everything that we brought for sheepers. So he really knew how to handle people. And it wasn't long they elevated him to a staff sergeant. So he went to, he always mentioned Saipan and Tinian. And he got wounded. He was a tank commander. And he got a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star.
Oh, wow.
And he not a lot of shooting medals and so on. He was pretty special. And he talked about the war too. It didn't seem to, maybe that was a way he dealt with it, but he told a lot of stories to the kids and everything. So he was good that way. But he got back, and my uncles, they said, "You bought those medals in the 5 and dime store."
Walmart.
Yeah.
Woolworths.
Well, there wasn't a Walmart. Woolworths,
Woolworths.
yeah, 5 and dime Woolworths, yeah. So, yeah, it's been, like I said, we've kept everything intact. We run about 4,000 sheep. Well, 3,200 ewes, and then with the replacements, about 700 to 800.
And so, what are some of the changes that you've seen and foresee? I mean, do you kind of keep a go, or are you constantly having to change how you do things?
Well, we have, in fact, this RWS, this wool that we got in. You always have to look to see if there's any niches out there. We sell quite a few lambs out of the ranch to local people, and we do that, and then plus our hunting, and we take care of the hides. We sell those hides. We take our pelts, the ones that we butcher, and we take them, and we get a special price for them. They're nice pelts, and we do a nice job with them. So there's just those little niches you always have to look at.
Soap.
And so, Karen, we were butchering once, and she came to our butcher shop, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're butchering." She said, "What are you doing with all that fat?" I said, "We throw it away." She said, "Well, that's a waste." So she got on the internet and started looking. They make soap. So she uses our tallow from our lambs that we butcher, and that's a basic.
That's what her soap is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great packaging.
Yeah. Fresh
It
milk.
was a
There
Christmas
you go.
gift. I haven't been able to open it yet. Butch says you need a degree
Yeah,
to,
you
to
do.
get into it. But
So he said, "Do you help her wrap it?" I said, "I can't even unwrap it." So,
We mentioned the 3 things that you guys were going to have to be really good at, and ironically, the merino part and the hunting seem to go really hand in hand now, because a lot of the base layers of hunters and hikers and that are merino wool. Is that some of your stuff too?
Oh, I'm sure it is. Our wool is really fine. I have to go in a very detailed way, but a 16 to 18 micron is really skin soft. The old wool we used to wear,
The
it really
itchy
itch.
stuff? Yeah.
No more. This
Right.
merino wool is skin soft. So the one wool buyer is from back east. His name was Bob Woodbury. Call him Bob Woodbury because he talked like that. He said, "Your wool, Butch, it's so fine. It's for the queen's panties." So we always use that. But it's a very unique clip, and there's a lot of people starting to tend towards the merinos, but
Yeah.
it's a big change. So they're not as quite as big as other sheep. They weigh about 180, 185 pounds. Where other sheep might weigh 200, but our philosophy on that is they don't eat as much either, a smaller animal. And the cattle people, they saw that quite a while ago.
so do they buy it? You ship it to them right off of your sheep, and then they process it, or do you process it and have? How's that work?
We get this crew down there, Bobby, and we built a shearing shed several years ago. It's been about I'm going to say 10 years. These years go back really quickly, but and it's a New Zealand type of shed. The guy that we buy the merino rams from, he's a carpenter also, and he built a shed, and it's beautiful. It'll hold 10 shears in there, and it's all under. The wind doesn't bother you. Doesn't mess with the wool or the dirt or anything. So our wool really yields well. It'll yield between 60 to 65%, where other clips are 45 to 50%. So we're getting 15% more wool out of our clip than most people. So, and that we put it in these special bags. They look like little loaves of bread, and we take it to Craig. We have been, and then we unload it there, and then they bring a semi in. It goes clear back to South Carolina, and there's a processing plant there. And then I went there once when at Woolgore's convention.
Yeah, I was going to say if you'd ever been back to see
I have. And I walked into this place. I said, I'm Butch Theos. He said, I don't know you, but I really know your wool. So it was very interesting that those people know all that. And they do a really nice job with it. And there's one sock company that's interested in our wool now. And you're right, Dale. It's skin soft now. But it dries from the inside out, where polyester, you can be dry on the outside and it's still wet on the inside. And people are learning that. And you can wear it in the summer now. They have special clothing, that your summer wear and all that, your athletic wear.
It's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really smooth on the skin. They use it as a base layer.
Yeah.
And so, it's...
And it's expensive. We get it, but it lasts forever. I've got Pendleton shirts. I've had them 25 years, and they look the same.
Yeah. Take care of them. They last for a long time, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Where do you see the industry going these days, Butch? Is there something on the horizon that you guys are looking forward to?
I don't see, we've got the predator situation. It's going to be a tough deal to deal with. But as far as, we have a board. We pay so much a lamb to advertise lamb. And it's very minimal compared to beef and pork and chicken. I mean, we have a $2 or $3 million budget nationwide, where beef has got like 80, 90 to $100 million. So, but with that, we do as good a job as we can. We have a board that does all that. So I don't see us. I don't know. Public lands is a big issue. A lot of people don't want us on public lands. And I think they use the bighorn as a crutch. They claim that domestic sheep pass on a virus to the bighorns, and that's sketchy at best. It's never been really proven, and there's a lot of other animals carry that same virus as sheep. They found out that deer have it, antelope have it, dogs have it, and so, but they're pinning it all on the domestic sheep. So there's been some of them have lost permits. And they can't take their sheep to graze there anymore because the bighorns are in close proximity. So, and it's interesting, they issue more licenses for the bighorns now, and they say they're becoming endangered. Well, if they're becoming endangered, why issue more licenses? So I don't know.
Vicious circle.
Yeah.
Hard to figure.
Yep.
Oh, and I did mention, well, in '65 we put on a play, Oklahoma. And people still talk about it. It was, well, see, I think Judy Eskelson was the main lead, and Richard Amick, really the Amicks up here, and Gene Starbuck, Larry Amick that passed away was in there, and Rusty Lancaster. I was in the chorus line. I had a line, though.
Okay, what was it?
Gonna give you barley, carrots, and potatoes. That's it. And then I jumped in the air.
Can we see the
was
jump?
big time.
No, that's over with, Bobby. I have a new knee, 2 new shoulders, and a back that's fused in 5 vertebrae.
Oh, my word. Is that
carpal
from football,
tunnel,
or is that from...
part of
shearing
it's
sheep?
football, but part of it's just the work, I think, and genetics. Genetics enter into it, too. So,
Well, that's terrible to have all those replacements and all of that, but I think that it does lead into the concept of how hard you guys have worked and how hard you've worked for 5 generations. And I think that's part of like the Greek culture. I mean, I know so many people along, like when we talk to Raftopoulos or Peroulis or whatever, what is passed down from generation to generation is a work ethic that's just beyond. Yeah. And unfortunately, I guess with that work ethic comes a little bit of a worn out body, but it certainly certainly creates outstanding kids and just a, like you said, a successful business.
Well, I used to hire the Janettis and the Stewarts and the Harps and a lot of different people to do stack hay.
Oh.
We used to stack 1,000, 1,200 bales a day and handle it 3 times, just with a lowboy going through the field, lift it on the lowboy, put it on the elevator, stack it, and it was 100 degrees weather. And you'd lift those bales, that wire would burn through your gloves. But it built character. And then after, we'd run home for exercise for football to start. So I don't think you could find a kid to do that today. Maybe, and they wouldn't know how either. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know even Papa Jim used to talk about always the hospitality too. Like Cole even said, there's never a time that you go by, if your relatives or Perulis or whatever, that they wouldn't invite you in for a drink and a conversation and the hospitality that goes along with that, I think is
good food. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my mother she was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Are you a cook at all?
Oh yeah. I put cinnamon in my stew and nobody likes it but me, but I don't care. My mother taught me that.
So you do it, huh? Well, good, Butch. We appreciate you coming on, and thanks for all you do. Maybe tell us a bit about. I know you're involved in a number of different things and on boards. Do you want to get into any of that?
Yeah, I was Colorado Wool Growers president twice now. We had to start recycling because the younger kids, nobody wanted to do it. And then I'm on the HPP committee here in Meeker. I've been on the National Wool Council. I've been on the National Lamb Board. I've been on the American Lamb Board. I've several. Most of it's involved with the sheep, and you learn. It's not what you learn so much, but it's being attached to other people that are in this business, and you learn from them. We were at a meeting once, and this one friend of mine said, we do this process with our ewe lambs. So I started doing it. And what it was we're docking. You bring the ewe lambs up to dock, and some of them have these 4 teats, and they're only 2 are only good. So we cut the others off, just a little snip. They don't even notice it. And what happens is they grow older, then the lamb only has a choice to get the two good ones. Before, they grab onto those others, and there wasn't any milk in them, and they'd probably be fine for a day or two, and you'd ride back in a couple of days, and they'd be dead. So we've eliminated that. Mm-hmm. And we learned that from just being around other sheep producers. And then predator control, we learned a lot about that and what other people do. And so it's interesting, those kind of things that happen. It helps
because
us.
You're involved in
Yeah.
At the
and
table.
I'm sure we
sure.
visit back and forth. How do you market your lambs? How do you market your wool? What kind of sheep herders are good? What aren't? And that's a big deal. And so it's helped us through the years of being involved. Now Tony's really involved, and Brady, we're going to get him involved. He might not know it, but he's going to be involved.
It seems like it's so important, though, for agriculture in general and in our area and across the United States, for collaboration and cooperation and to get out there and network like you're doing, because you have to stand together because it's a hard old go.
Yeah, it takes I hate to use the phrase, but it takes a village.
Well, we appreciate it. Appreciate your time, Butch.
Yeah, thank you, Butch.
And all you do, and the family history, and keep it go.
Yeah, keep it go. That's
Keep
our
it
motto.
go.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope it was enlightening.
Good. And you can see this. We'll get it uploaded to our Facebook page, Cowboy Coffee with Coaches. If you'd like to get involved, please go to our website, Cowboy Coffee with Coaches .com Meeker Alumni, right? Or / Meeker Alumni.
/ Meeker Alumni.
There you go. Okay. Well, thanks a lot again, Butch, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thanks, Butch.
Okay.